Givaradhari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Munatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yasodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Munatira Vanachar Munatira Vanachar Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jai Shri Prabhupada ki Jai Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai Go Premanande Hari Hari Bo. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 5. Today's text is text number 28 and 29. Let me just call up 28 here. What's that? Canto 7, Chapter 5, text 28. Okay, so I'll read the first verse, text 28, and then we can do 29 together. Text 28, Shri Guru Putra Uvacha Namat Pranitam Na Para Pranitam Suto Vadati Esa Tavendra Satro Naisar Kikiam matir asya rajan niyacha manyum kad adha smamah. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The son of Sukracharya, Hiranyakashipu's spiritual master said, O enemy of King Indra, O king, whatever your son Prahlad has said was not taught to him by me or anyone else. His spontaneous devotional service has naturally developed in him. Therefore, please give up your anger and do not unnecessarily accuse us. It is not good to insult a Brahmana in this way. Text 29. Sri Naradu Vacha Gurunaivam Pratik Prokto Bhuya Aharsura Sutam Nachet Guru Mukhiyam Te Kutu Abhadrasati Mati Sri Naradu Vacha Gurunaivam Prati Prokto Bhuya Ahasura Sutam Na Chet Guru Mukhyam Te Kuto Abrasati Mati Sri Naradu Vacha Gurunaivam Prati Prokto Bhuya Ahasura Sutam Nachet Guru Mukhyam Te Kuto Abrasati Mati. Okay, Prabhus, anybody like to try, please?
Shri Narada Uvacha Gurunaivam Prati Prokto Bhuya Ahasura Sutam Nachet Guru Mukhiyam Te Kuto Bhadrasati Matahi.
Shri Naroduvacha Guru Nanam Patiprokto Bhuya Aha Surasutam Nachet Guru Mukhiyante Kuto Patrasti Matihi.
Anyone else?
Okay. Sri Narada Uvacha Gurunaivam Prati Parukto Bhuya Ahasura Sutam Nachet Guru Mukhiyam Te Kuto Bhadra Sati Mati.
Jai. Sri Naradu Vacha, Narad Muni said, Guruna by the teacher, evam thus, prati prokta being answered, Bhuya again, aha said, Asura, the great demon Hiranyakashipu, Sutam unto his son, na not, Chet if Guru Mukhi issued from the mouth of your teacher, Yam this te your Kuta from where? Abhadra, O inauspicious one. Asati, very bad. Mati, inclination. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sri Narad Muni continued, when Hiranyakashipu received this reply from the teacher, he again addressed his son Prahlad. Hiranyakashipu said, You rascal, most fallen of our family, if you have not received this education from your teachers, where have you gotten it? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Viswanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that devotional service is actually Bhadrasati, not Abhadra Asati. In other words, knowledge of devotional service can be neither inauspicious nor contrary to etiquette. To learn devotional service is the duty of everyone. Therefore, the spontaneous education of Prahlad Maharaj is supported as auspicious and perfect. Om Gyana Timrandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshurlamitam Yana Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Revacha Patita Nama Pavanabhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasti Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so the drama is unfolding, and we see in the previous verses, of course, Prahlad Maharaj has been speaking devotional service, and at first, of course, Hiranyakashipu first tries to accuse his teachers that, he's a young boy, 5 years old, going to school. I've hired, my spiritual master's sons who are very qualified to educate him in terms of our family lineage and how he can be just as a great ruler as I am. And of course, Hiranyakashipu had been terrorizing all the planetary systems and were practically ruling everything. And so we see that he first tries to accuse his teachers, and his teachers are replying, "O enemy of King Indra, O king, whatever your son Prahlad has said was not taught to him by me or anyone else. His spontaneous devotional service has naturally developed in him. Therefore, please give up your anger and do not unnecessarily accuse us." And of course, he throws in there, it is not good to insult a Brahmin in this way. So, of course, these sons of Sukracharya are indeed Brahmanas, and they're just pointing out, by the way, it is not good to insult a Brahmana in this way, because he was furious. What have they been teaching him? Why have they been teaching him devotional service? Otherwise, where else could he have gotten it? But they're highlighting that actually it is spontaneous devotional service has naturally developed in him. But we understand that Prahlad Maharaj, when he was in the womb of his mother, he had heard from Narad Muni. And in this way, he was a pure devotee of the Lord. We also mentioned he is also one of the 14 Mahajans who are giving us knowledge. And so we see in this context, Hiranyakashipu was assuming that knowledge must have been taught. And then, of course, with his demoniac mentality, he was thinking that someone has to be responsible and someone must be punished. So this is, someone just trying to use logic and reason. But we understand that devotional service, you cannot just use logic and reason. It is on the spiritual platform, and the general rules in the material world don't apply as far as devotional service is concerned. So that's why he turned to these two teachers, Sanda and Amarka, and he was accusing them. So we understand from the Bhagavatam, or the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam, that bhakti is not manufactured. Bhakti is not created by education. It is awakened by the mercy of a pure devotee. So we all understand that, within the heart of all living entities, there is the soul, the super soul, witness, overseer, and permitter, residing there. And the goal of life is to soften our hearts. Well, of course, firstly, get rid of all the unwanted desires that have accumulated for these millions and billions of lifetimes of birth that we have been transmigrating through. And as a result, these hearts of ours have become hard. And if you're looking at my heart, steel framed. I just Googled steel framed heart, and there's some nice depictions of what a steel framed heart looks like. There's one heart, some of them are red in color. There's one heart that has been wrapped by metal and riveted together. So steel framed heart. So we understand that this process of bhakti, if executed properly, and there's so much of direction given in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we've just already been through extensively Prabhupada's purport about the 9 processes of devotion in the previous verses. And this process of bhakti, excuse me, is meant to gradually, for the conditioned soul, remove these layers of conditioning, and thereby exposing our true nature of the living entity, spirit soul, so that we can gradually soften our hearts and reawaken our original Krishna consciousness, which is always existing there. So just because of this lifetimes of conditioning, it's become really covered, and we want to uncover our real spiritual identity. We understand we're in the material world, and we're undergoing this material experience, but it doesn't mean that our makeup is completely material. So from Hiranyakashipu's point of view, he was thinking that someone must be responsible, someone must be punished. Otherwise, where else could Prahlad have gotten this type of advanced bhakti knowledge that he was speaking to his father? And of course, his teachers are pointing out, no, it's not the case. We haven't taught him. Prahlad did not learn bhakti in school. He did not learn it from a teacher. He did not learn it from books. And we understand that he received bhakti within the womb from Narad Muni. So our understanding is that devotion is very inherent to the soul. And I was thinking of another example, a similar example to how Prahlad Maharaj had gotten his knowledge. And I was remembering how Abhimanyu, he also had received knowledge whilst he was in the womb. And we understand how that pastime occurred, where at some point on the battlefield, there was just intense fighting from all sides. And the idea was to distract Arjuna, and some of the great warriors got together and surrounded, or they had created this military phalanx that no one could really penetrate. And the only person that knew how to enter the phalanx of that army was Arjuna's son Abhimanyu. And so when Yudhishthira had assessed the situation, they decided to send Abhimanyu in to penetrate the formation that the opposing army had formed, because otherwise they would have created great destruction. And the plan was, once they are inside, Abhimanyu had mentioned that he had heard whilst he was in the womb how to enter the formation, but he did not know how to exit without being killed or injured. And so we understand from that pastime, he had gotten this knowledge whilst he was even in the womb. But his mother had fallen asleep, by the time the narration was there of how to exit that military formation. So, yeah, it's amazing, interesting to understand that, we think, of course, the baby is in the womb and, what can the baby learn? Whilst in the womb, we must wait for the child to be born, reach 5 years of age and, go to school, get training in school. But we see that, the spirit soul is not as, because of their spiritual identity, is not restricted, by these so-called material principles. And so now we see many parents today understand this principle thanks to the Srimad Bhagavatam. Thanks, of course, to our founder, Acharya Srila Prabhupada, for giving us this knowledge that this bhakti knowledge is not restricted to once one is 5 years old or 6 years old, for that matter. So Sukracharya's son, he also protects the integrity of the Brahmanas by saying, give up your anger. It is not good to insult a Brahmana. So we see that, even previously, Hiranyakashipu was speaking so much of high Vedic philosophy. And so, he was very, very knowledgeable about the Vedic literatures. Still, of course, his downfall was his ego. And of course, he hated Vishnu. He was more upset and furious about Lord Vishnu having killed his brother Hiranyaksha. So we see in these verses also that, of course, even these two teachers, they also recognize spontaneous devotion. We don't know where it has come from. And of course, having being educated in the Vedas, there is, an understanding from the Vedas that power does not override dharma. And, we saw this on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Yes, whilst there was, so much of killing going on, so much of fighting, still, as much as Duryodhana wanted, power, wanted complete control. We heard recently how, he said he will not even give them enough land that they could even drive a pinning. So this is how, egotistical and envious even Duryodhana was. But still, the principles of Dharma cannot be overridden, even though, you can have multiple armies, great warriors, Bhishma was also fighting on their side. So it does not matter as far as Dharma is concerned. So our application for today, is that, of course, we see different types of persons come to Krishna consciousness. And we see that sometimes some people are naturally attracted to Krishna. So we understand in our spiritual journey that most times like last week we were speaking about, oh, sorry, not last week. I spoke at Anand Vilas's program and we were discussing the good bank account, the bad bank account, and the spiritual bank account. That whatever deposits we make into this spiritual bank account of ours is never lost, like the material good and bad bank accounts. There's always additions and withdrawals, constantly going on. The spiritual bank account is to our eternal credit. So whatever activities we perform on the spiritual platform in devotional service, they are never lost. And so, of course, this process of transmigration continues, whether we like it or not, whether we accept it or not. This process of transmigration between these 8,400,000 species of life continues nevertheless. And, depending on where we take off in our Krishna consciousness again in the next life, hopefully we get a human form of life, and we understand from the Shastra that this human form of life is not guaranteed. So we find that sometimes some people are more attracted to Krishna, or naturally. Of course, we said that the soul is originally Krishna conscious, naturally Krishna conscious. This is the nature of the living entity, spirit, soul. So whilst others, they gradually grow in their Krishna consciousness, gradually we can shed these layers by the both process of learning, but at the same time, mercy of the devotees. So it's not like one is valid and one is not valid. Both is valid. We see that Prabhupada in his translations and purports, he numerous times mentions the word gradual development of our Krishna consciousness. So it's not that, we stumble upon Krishna consciousness today and tomorrow, or in a few days, few weeks, if we are able to, read the entire Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, we become pure devotees. No, that's not how the process works. Of course, it depends where we left off in our Krishna consciousness too. So, as devotees, we should not be envious of some devotees that may be more advanced. Sometimes, in order to justify our own position, we of course all want to be Krishna conscious. And, as we start associating with devotees, we find that sometimes, some devotees might be more scholarly, might be more paka in their Krishna consciousness, and, may practice in a very humble, gentle way. And sometimes, we've heard how devotees can become envious of other devotees and how expert they may be in their Krishna consciousness. But, we should not go down these rabbit holes because they just end in misery. Sometimes devotees get accused of fanaticism because of their level of sincerity. But we should always just focus on our own Krishna consciousness. I always have said that Krishna consciousness, as much as, there needs to be visible sadhana and visible execution of our bhakti, still at the same time, it's a very, very personal thing. Because, ultimately, as much as there might be, the externals, ultimately, at the time of death, whatever's going on in our consciousness, that we have not shared with anybody, will be the real judgment of, what happens, whether we end up taking a next birth, and what the next birth is, or whether we make the exit from the material world. So very, very personal endeavor, this Krishna consciousness process. So there's no reason to fake where we're at in our Krishna consciousness, no reason to pretend how advanced we are. Still, at the same time, we want to be encouraged in our Krishna consciousness, especially seniors should encourage juniors We understand also if devotees are on the same level as us, we should also give friendship genuinely, and just focus on our own bhakti process. So we see, of course, Hiranyakashipu, he is bewildered as far as where did he get his education from. And so this idea of bhakti to the demoniac mind is a complete mystery. So we see that, the Bhagavad Gita even is, got one whole chapter dedicated to the divine and demoniac, all the qualities, especially the demoniac qualities are given in complete detail. And so we, should stay clear of these demoniac qualities and focus on, the bhakti qualities, divine qualities. Generally, we understand that the demons, they credit themselves with all that they have achieved. It's interesting because, of course, Hiranyakashipu was no different. He also understood that there is so much of power that can be gotten. And of course, he had requested the boon from Lord Brahma. So on the one hand, there might be some acknowledgement that there is higher powers, but this is why, he feels due to his austerity, imagine standing on your toes for thousands of years, due to his austerity, he became qualified to achieve, the boons that he did get from Lord Brahma. Of course, he wanted complete immortality, but, Lord Brahma had explained that, even he is not immortal. But his demoniac mind was so expert that he thought of a plan to get different types of boons that he thought made him invincible and immortal, until the appearance of Lord Nrsingadev. So Hiranyakashipu, he is controlling the universe. He conquered all the demigods. He's mastered, austerity. Still, he cannot understand bhakti principles, faith, love, surrender. Yeah, for the demoniac, they cannot understand, of course, that devotion comes from the soul itself. So the idea that, bhakti is self-manifest, the understanding is that when the obstacles are removed, then devotion flows naturally. Of course, Hiranyakashipu is furious by this point, and we understand what anger does. Anger is the enemy of understanding. So Hiranyakashipu's, anger or rage is, blinding him to any reasoning, any intellectual reason whatsoever. So if we look in the world today, we can see, the similar thing is going on. And it's not just here in America, it's not just in this continent, that continent, in Europe. Everybody is wanting power, authority, but of course, none of them, none of these leaders in the world, um, understand practically anything about um, submission to God. They believe that, they have qualified themselves to become rulers, and therefore, everybody has to just submit to their authority. So this, demoniac quality is just raging, not just, in leaders of the world, but practically every living entity. Everybody wants to become a leader of some sort so that they can control their environment. And, this is the condition that has, brought us to the material world. This envy of Krishna brought us to the material world in the first place, where we are trying to, lord it over material nature. So, this kind of like perfect setting has been created for the envious. And, this material world is going on that principle of everybody, every living entity trying to lord it over material nature. So unless we can come into contact with a devotee, by the mercy of a devotee, come into contact with Krishna consciousness, the spiritual knowledge, then there is some hope. Otherwise, no hope. Just continue this transmigration lifetime after lifetime. So another question arises, of course, as leaders in ISKCON today, also we see within our society, there's always so much of criticism going on of all the leaders. GBC does not do this, GBC does that, GBC does not do this. There's just a long list of complaints, even within the society of bhakti that Prabhupada has given us. So, all of these challenges, of course, come about because of this contamination within our hearts. We're in the early stages of this bhakti process. And, Prabhupada has given us morning program, given us so many nice facilities to gradually make advancement in this process of bhakti. But still, this lower nature of ours, especially envy, continuously challenges our bhakti process. And we need to, be able to recognize bhakti when it appears. And if it challenges me, then, how do I deal with it? We understand we want to nurture each other's Krishna consciousness and not just keep fault finding. This chanting of the holy names is a real process to be able to go back home, back to Godhead. But still, so many obstacles remain. Prahlad Maharaj, of course, is a great example, showing that bhakti is natural. Bhakti is very, very powerful. And of course, in this extreme example, in one sense, Prahlad Maharaj is demonstrating that bhakti cannot be suppressed by any force. He has the most powerful demon in the world, arranging for his son to be killed in so many different ways. Yet Prahlad Maharaj, is not showing any anger, any signs of, vindictiveness, just because of his natural bhakti. He is just even, asking Lord Nrsingadev, to forgive his father. So this is the power of bhakti, and this is what we should focus on, not everything else that's going on around us, and get distracted and go down different rabbit holes. What else? Bhagavad Gita 10:10, to those who are constantly devoted to me, I give the intelligence by which they can come to me. And then, of course, the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita, abandon all varieties of religion, just surrender unto me. So this is the takeaway from these two verses. Okay, I'll stop there. Any comments, questions, additions, subtractions, realizations from these verses, dear Prabhus?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Gauranga.
Gauranga. Hey, I want to thank you for a nice class. I'm thinking about your comments about Abhimanyu, another example of an individual acquiring knowledge while in the womb. This is a concept that is foreign to most people these days. They don't, well, right, there is the idea that that children in the womb can acquire some things once they reach the stage of development at which they are conscious. That some parents will read to their children while they're in the womb, and really the child is not going to understand what's being read, but they will become familiar with the voice of their parents, and attachment, the connection develops at a very early age. It has been seen, but the concept that one can understand more complex aspects of knowledge from the womb is not generally accepted nowadays. But there are lots of examples in Vedic literature, and Prahlad Maharaj, of course, is one of the prime examples. That there is a difference between mundane knowledge and transcendental knowledge. Mundane knowledge may require greater cognition to be able to assimilate, but transcendental knowledge conveyed through sound vibration acts very differently. It's a completely different animal. Doesn't matter that a living entity is completely covered by different layers of ignorance. They may be in the body of an animal, they may be in the womb, maybe in the body of a very young child, but in any condition, transcendental sound vibration will still have some effect, especially if it is heard with a submissive attitude and with attention. But even in the absence of those, transcendental sound vibration still has an effect. You don't have to consciously understand what you're hearing, but just by hearing, the sound vibration penetrates all the layers of covering and enters the heart of the living entity and takes effect. There are various examples that one could cite. apart from these instances of individuals gaining knowledge while in the womb. For example, Srila Prabhupada in India would sometimes give classes in Hindi or Bengali, depending upon his audience. And there were instances when he would begin to speak in Hindi, for example, and his Western disciples who did not speak Hindi would begin to get up and leave because they thought, what is the point of me sitting and hearing this lecture? I can't understand the word that he's saying. And Srila Prabhupada would stop them and insist that they sit down and listen attentively, because it doesn't matter that you can't understand what's being said. The sound vibration still has effect. So you hear it anyway. You listen with attention, and you still derive the benefit. The understanding will come automatically. The sound vibration will take effect, and then the understanding will arise in time automatically just by hearing, whether you are cognitively or consciously aware. It's an extraordinary feature of transcendental sound vibration, but it's something to be aware of, and one can take advantage of that understanding that you don't have to be able to understand what's being said. You just have to allow the sound vibration to penetrate, and it will still take effect. So it's a wonderful thing. Srila Prabhupada used to instruct us to chant for the benefit of not just the human beings, but all living entities. Everyone in any condition of life can derive benefit by hearing transcendental sound vibration. If you chant Hare Krishna, and there's no people around, the trees will still benefit, the insects will benefit, any sort of creatures, various animal species. Doesn't matter that they are covered with so much ignorance. They may not understand the sound vibration, but it will still have an effect. There was an instance of Govinda Dasi was sitting with Srila Prabhupada in New Jersey. Srila Prabhupada was in New Jersey near the shore for his health for a period of time, and they're sitting in the backyard of a rented house, and Govinda Dasi noticed a slug. For those who are not familiar with slugs, a slug is like a snail, but without the shell, just this slimy thing. And the snail is crawling along. Govinda Dasi saw it and recoiled in disgust and said, "Ew." And Srila Prabhupada took note, and he instructed her to, he said, chant to the poor creature. So very instructive. We should be compassionate towards such creatures, not just disgusted by them, but we should also understand that they also can derive benefit by hearing the transcendental sound vibration. So just a few examples. Anyway, what else? Demoniac qualities manifested to various degrees according to one's degree of purification. And there's all different kinds of purification. Some may be advanced in one area, but not so advanced in another area. And we don't generally want to make relative judgments about who is more or less advanced. We respect all devotees, and we try to appreciate them for all of what is good and positive in them, and we disregard whatever is negative. It is expected that there will be all kinds of dirt in the heart. Takes time to clear all of the dirt. But we don't criticize someone because they're dirty. The example that Srila Prabhupada gave is that it is senseless to criticize someone for being dirty while they are in the shower. they're in the shower, obviously they've taken up the process of cleaning themselves. So what point is there in criticizing them for being dirty? We all start out dirty. What's important is that we are diligently applying the cleansing process, trying to rid ourselves of those impurities. But the instruction is not that we should be stupid. We shouldn't be blind. And it sometimes happens that there really are faults that we should not overlook. I've given the example a number of times of the incident that happened in New York when we had a leader who was both the temple president and the GBC. He served both those functions. But he had genuinely gone off the rails. He was in Maya. And there were those who chose to look the other way and pretend that everything was fine. And so the problems escalated and were not addressed initially. It took quite some time before the issues came to the attention of Srila Prabhupada, who immediately took some action. And his action was that he engaged a number of senior devotees in doing an investigation to uncover the facts. Not that he jumped to conclusions and nothing like that, but so it happens sometimes that that even leaders, even at GBC, may be in Maya, and perhaps in a way that is detrimental to the well-being of other devotees. Sometimes bad things happen, unfortunately. We should not be blind. We should generally see only the good and disregard the bad, but not with a stupid attitude that we disregard something that is truly problematic or dangerous to other individuals. Things that may adversely affect the progress of the movement or the welfare of devotees. These kinds of things can't be disregarded. So sometimes when we preach to devotees about how to regard others, particularly leaders, and that they should not be envious and so on, sometimes they will charge us with gaslighting, that we're trying to induce them to remain blind to real problems, and that's a serious issue. It's not imaginary. Sometimes gaslighting does go on, but it should not. It's not a good thing. That should be obvious. There's necessity sometimes to take action when things are not correct. So, and we should be clear about that, because sometimes, young devotees especially sometimes are put off by the fact that we discourage any kind of criticism under all circumstances, without exception. And it's important that they understand that that's not really our philosophy. Blindness and stupidity is not our philosophy. We should be conscious of what's going on, and we should understand when there is genuinely a necessity for some action to be taken. If there's any question, then a devotee can approach someone more senior and express their concerns, and there can be investigation to see whether further action is required, or whether, in fact, that devotee is really just suffering the the growing pains of overcoming some envy. Either scenario may be the case, and it has to be examined more carefully to determine what the facts are. But we don't want to discourage young devotees by leading them to believe that that our philosophy is that we should be blind to everything under all circumstances. That discourages some people, and sometimes they go away because they think that we're being quite unreasonable. We're not unreasonable. We want to be intelligent about these things. That at least was Srila Prabhupada's position, and that's what he taught us. So we want to represent him very accurately. Anyway, those are a few of my thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Haribol. Anyone else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Haribol.
Thank you very much for an informative class. Very happy to hear that despite your busy schedule, you're able to still preach and go out
Hare
and attend
Krishna.
his work. It's very nice. So my question, Tarka Prabhu addressed it in principle, but I'd just like to hear from you by citing a specific example. So Srila Prabhupada is citing Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur as saying that devotional service is always auspicious, right? Bhadra Sati. But he's not elaborating, right? So he's just saying that this is a characteristic of devotional service. But in the example you cited with, one could make the argument in the example you cited with Abhimanyu that actually that knowledge of him knowing how to penetrate the Chaturvyuha is inauspicious because had he not known, he wouldn't have actually put himself in that position. And therefore, he wouldn't have been subjected to, quote unquote, the child abuse of a young 16-year-old surrounded by Maharatis and just being killed that way. Similarly, even with Prahlad Maharaj, because of, one could make the argument that because he knows devotional service, his father is actually abusing him, right? So he's about to try to kill him as a response to this, and so his father's going to go to extraordinary lengths to try to abuse him. So we see in our society there has been a history of child abuse, right? And your spiritual master famously made the prayer, like Vasudev, that to undergo, basically to absorb those reactions for the youth so that they can actually go on with their practice. So based on what you observed while you're serving as spiritual master, what he said, and what, in addition to the sacrifice he made, what did he say, and what did he do for the young people who weren't like Prahlad Maharaj, who weren't Uttama Adhikaris, who weren't completely absorbed in devotional service, to always experience that as Bhadra Sati. Because of this trauma, their experience of devotional service is that it's Abhadra Sati, because we were our fathers, our mothers, they weren't there for us. Our teachers were abusing us. So I just want to hear from you, Prabhu. Just from what you saw your illustrious spiritual master do to convince the youth that devotional service is always auspicious.
Yeah, of course, I think you gave all the answers yourself. But the idea is that I think, all of us can do this in one sense, become such powerful carriers of bhakti. We saw, of course, Bhakti Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's contribution to Prabhupada's movement was very unique in many ways. But, Maharaj was, of course, a very powerful carrier of this bhakti process of, devotional service in action. Maharaj's desire was that, he dies on the battlefield. And this is exactly, how he went out, dying on the battlefield, preaching till the very, very last moment. So this process of devotional service, I'm just looking quickly at the Nectar of Devotion. And if you just look at the chapter titles without reading, Characteristics of Pure Devotional Service, Chapter 1. Chapter 2, the first stages of devotion. Chapter 3, eligibility of the candidate for accepting devotional service. Devotional service surpasses all liberation, the purity of devotion, and on and on and on. How to discharge devotional service. So, even if we just take one book, the Nectar of Devotion, and try to really understand, what is going on, one can become empowered. And Maharaj, of course, also spoke about that, empowerment. And at what point, how did the saying go? That if one is so much desirous of performing devotional service, but you physically don't have the capacity, there's only 24 hours in the day to do service. But if one, is so desirous, at that point in time, empowerment begins. And so then, one can do extraordinary things. So Maharaj definitely, lived that principle in action. And, we saw it, everybody saw it, all the devotees saw it. And this is why he was able to, access the hearts, the real, true spiritual nature of the devotees that were affected by it. Not that, everybody now after that experience became a pure devotee, but still, many testified that, the way Maharaj had reached out to them, really appealed to their true spiritual nature. And this is why, so much emotion was there. If we think about even Bhakti Maharaj, was famous for pointing out that, just look at Queen Kunti and her prayers, bring on the calamities. And, Maharaj did that one time in Mayapur, I think. He asked the devotees, how many of you dare pray like Queen Kunti? And so, that's why I say it's a very personal choice, personal experience of Krishna consciousness, as much as the externals have to be there. Still, we see that so many powerful devotees, and yes, there is Prahlad Maharaj, there is Abhimanyu, all these great personalities. But, there's also these modern day spiritual masters that still have been able to access, this kind of devotional qualities that transcends, our mundane experiences in the material world. That's just my thoughts and realizations. Anybody else has more thoughts and realizations to Gari Krishna's deep question?
Thanks, Prabhu.
My understanding is, we can't fake Krishna consciousness. Radhanath Maharaj once said, fake it till you make it, I know. But there was a context to that too. So, yeah, difficult to fake. Doesn't matter how big a leader you've become in ISKCON, become a controller of so many parts of the world as GBC, but we see ultimately that Bhakti reigns supreme. And, there's no cheating in Krishna consciousness. The only cheating that goes on is we cheat ourselves. And the sooner we all realize that, the better for us. So Prabhupada, like where Charaka Prabhu has been telling, Srila Prabhupada has given us practically everything we need to go back home, back to Godhead. He's given us the process, the means, the vehicle, the association, the environment, the detailed process of going back home, back to Godhead. How serious are we about going back to Godhead? That remains to be seen. So yeah, we can, try to encourage each other, but how serious are we really about following these principles? Anyone else? Thoughts, realizations? We have so many great devotees in our midst, and we should take advantage of each other's association on the spiritual platform and gradually shed these layers, become qualified to go back home, back to Godhead. Hari Chakra Prabhu, thank you. Taraka Prabhu, thank you. The Leela Kishori, Mother Yashoda, Dina Palika, Jagannath Pandit, Yashvadev, Stalwart, they without fail, rain or shine. So we have so much nice association to take advantage of. As we, remain in the shower, cleanse ourselves, become qualified to go back home. So thank you all for your blessings and association. We are forever grateful. Okay, going once, going twice. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Go Premanande, Hari Hari Bo.